Thank you so much for giving us some of your time.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me.
What did you make of yesterday's oral arguments?
I think that we're going to prevail in the case. I think the law is clear. Certainly when it comes to birthright citizenship, that is a well-established foundational constitutional right that belongs to everyone nationwide throughout this country. The 14th Amendment Citizenship Clause makes it clear. The Supreme Court has interpreted it and made it clear. And it doesn't make any sense for there just to be birthright citizenship rights in some states but not in others. And that was the issue that was raised in the argument yesterday around the appropriateness of nationwide injunctions. And a nationwide injunction is very appropriate here because the constitutional right of birthright citizenship applies nationwide to all people in the nation. And it wouldn't make any sense for birthright citizenship to apply in California and New Jersey, but not in Texas and Pennsylvania. And that is essentially what the federal government, the Trump administration, was proposing yesterday. And birthright citizenship applies to everyone throughout the nation, not just those in the states where the attorneys general decided to fight for the rights of their people, and not in the states where the attorneys general didn't bother.
Do you think the Supreme Court was skeptical of the Trump administration's argument?
Yeah. And certainly when it comes to the underlying substantive issue of birthright citizenship, that wasn't the main issue before the court yesterday. It was more about nationwide injunctions. There was proposals by the Trump administration that nationwide injunctions are never appropriate. And I think there was clearly a belief from the court that, or certainly some members of the court, that a nationwide injunction is appropriate here when a constitutional right that applies nationally is at stake, when fundamental rights are at issue. And we've argued that not every case is appropriate for a nationwide injunction, but also we've argued that nationwide injunctions are appropriate under some circumstances, and they shouldn't be prohibited absolutely and categorically in all cases. So we'll see how the court decides this case, but I definitely think that the law is on our side, that we will prevail on the underlying substantive issue of birthright citizenship continuing to be a constitutional right, and also on the appropriateness of a nationwide injunction in this case.
You know, you've been on the front lines of this, pushing back against the Trump administration. 22 lawsuits in 16 weeks. That's quite a pace. You know, what do you see as the most important case, if there is one, that pertains to California that is, you know, in the court right now?
I think every one of our cases is important, of course. There are a couple of different themes in the actions that the Trump administration is taking. One is to violate people's constitutional rights and freedoms. The birthright citizenship case is a good example of that. For everyone who deserves birthright citizenship but is being deprived of it, or is at risk of being deprived of it because of this executive order, that's incredibly important. The Trump administration, the second sort of category of unlawful and unconstitutional actions that he's engaged in include trying to withhold already congressionally appropriated funding on critical and essential services for the states, including the state of California. His second action that we brought a lawsuit on involved $3 trillion of funding from the Office of Management and Budget. About $168 billion worth would have gone to California for critical services like healthcare and housing and food and college and child care and public safety and emergency and disaster relief. And it would have been withheld if Trump had his way, but we were able to block that unlawful order and make sure that the money continued to flow. So there's billions of dollars at stake for critical services for Californians, and NIH funding is another example of that. Cuts to education funding, health and human services funding, to AmeriCorps. There's a critical case about our elections. Trump is trying to exert authority he doesn't have that belongs to Congress and the states, trying to require proof of citizenship at time of voting, and also not allowing for votes that are cast before Election Day but received after to count. That could really impact elections in California. Of course, our tariff case is very important because we're the fourth largest economy in the world. Our outsized economy means outsized adverse impacts from these tariffs. So they all matter in different ways, but when you're attacking fundamental rights and critical federal funding, those really impact California, and we're going to be immovable and resolute in fighting back when the Trump administration breaks the law.
Yeah, so speaking about federal funding, you filed 2 new cases this week pertaining to grants through the Department of Homeland Security and Transportation and the ties with immigration that the Trump administration is trying to enforce. Elaborate on that for us.
Yeah, the Trump administration is trying to unlawfully coerce states into participating in and doing the work of civil immigration enforcement that the federal government certainly is allowed to do and may do, but they can't force us to do it. But they're trying to condition these critical grants on our commitment to conduct civil immigration enforcement and cooperate with them in their actions. And civil immigration enforcement is completely unrelated to transportation funding and Homeland Security funding. Homeland Security funding supports things like cybersecurity and counterterrorism and emergency preparedness, and Department of Transportation funding is to help keep our planes in the air and make sure that flights are safe for passengers, and that we're building our roads and building our rail and making sure cars and trains can move safely and efficiently. And he's trying to add this other element and condition to that funding that Congress and the statutes involved don't provide for, and that the Constitution, the spending clause, prohibits. So another unlawful action, disappointingly but unsurprisingly, from the Trump administration, and we sued to make sure our rights are vindicated in court. $35 billion at issue for us with these 2 sources of grants for Homeland Security and Department of Transportation. So a lot at stake for us.
I also wanted to ask you, in that same vein, the president signed an order seeking to identify sanctuary jurisdictions and potentially cut federal funding to them. What, if any, communication have you had with the federal government on this issue? And are you concerned about the steps that ICE is taking within California to potentially detain individuals?
So the federal government certainly can enforce civil immigration laws, and they have agencies and departments that do that. As long as they do it lawfully, they may do it, and California will not interfere or obstruct in their ability to do that. But what cannot happen is they cannot commandeer, conscript, impress into service, force California law enforcement to do their job for them. They can do their job. They can't force the states to do their job for them. The 10th Amendment prohibits that. It's a constitutional right of the state of California. We've already won this issue in Trump 1.0 in a case called U.S. versus California that upholds our state law that says we're going to use our law enforcement resources for criminal law enforcement to tackle rapes and murders and robberies, and not use those valuable limited resources for civil immigration enforcement when there's a whole set of departments and agencies at the federal level that are going to do that. And we also believe that it's good when witnesses report crime, when victims report crime, if they think they're going to be retaliated against by the federal administration when they do that, or by state law enforcement agencies and departments, they won't come forward. So that cooperation is really important for public safety. So, we're aware of the federal administration's approach on what they call sanctuary states. We don't use that term, and sanctuary jurisdictions, and we haven't been in any direct conversation with them besides knowing about their efforts. Not surprised by these efforts. They've been projected, telegraphed. They were used in Trump 1.0, and we saw this coming and are not surprised.
When it comes to federal funding, there is this conversation too about wildfire relief, right? The governor asking for $40 billion from the federal government to help the Los Angeles County communities recover. Yeah. Is there a concern that pushing back too hard on this administration will result in retaliation of not getting that funding?
The Trump administration has made it clear, both in Trump 1.0, Trump 2.0, that he's targeting blue states, he's targeting Democrats, he's targeting states that didn't vote for him, he's targeting California. That's been his MO and his approach from day one. So we are going to be unapologetic and immovable on our commitment to make sure he follows the law. If he's going to retaliate because we're saying, standing on the very unremarkable proposition that the President of the United States needs to follow the law and comply with the Constitution, I don't know what to do with that. That's his decision, but he must follow the law, period, full stop. When it comes to emergency relief, we expect him to do what every president has done, which is when a state and its people are suffering from a natural disaster, when they are healing and need to recover and are deserving of FEMA funding, they should get it. It doesn't matter if they're a red state or a blue state. It doesn't matter if they don't agree to some condition on an unrelated issue like water policy or proof of citizenship at voting, which Trump has talked about. You should send the money because they're Americans in need, period. Biden did that in Texas when Texas suffered from a natural disaster. Biden did that for Florida, another red state, when Florida suffered from a natural disaster. Trump should do it here for California because Californians are suffering from the wildfires, and that's it.
Do you think President Trump has a vendetta against California?
I don't know what the right word is, but he definitely seeks political vengeance or vindication against the people he thinks don't support him. He did this in Trump 1.0 with the state and local tax deduction, which harmed blue states. He knew that. He removed that deduction. He's certainly, San Francisco is a favorite target for him. California and New York have been as well. So it's completely inappropriate and beneath the dignity of the office for these political vindication and targeting to occur against states. We're one United States of America. All the people in this United States are represented by the president. He should fight for better lives and futures for all of them, but unfortunately he's chosen to make it political.
How do states protect their 10th Amendment rights to self-determination when it seems this president continues to infringe on it? We've seen Senate Republicans now toying with this idea of voting to revoke California's clean air waivers, and that's something that the parliamentarian says they don't even have the power to do. Right. So how do states like California and beyond protect their 10th Amendment rights under Trump 2.0?
We must be vigilant and absolutely committed to vindicating our rights when they're violated. And that means going to court and suing the Trump administration, as we have 22 times in 16 weeks, as you've mentioned, when he breaks the law. And if all we have is political grievance or policy or ideological difference, we can't go to court, we won't go to court. But if he breaks the law, if he violates the Constitution, we will see him in court and we will stop him, as we have in a majority of these cases. Of those 22 cases, in most of them, we've secured preliminary injunctions or temporary restraining orders that have stopped his unlawful conduct, that have vindicated our 10th Amendment rights, or ensured that he follows the separation of powers and checks and balances in our democratic system, and otherwise held him accountable. So the way for us to protect ourselves is to fight in court when the Trump administration seeks to break the law and violate the Constitution.
Is your office preparing for a potential court battle on these clean air waivers?
We're watching that issue closely, and if the law is violated, as I think it's been signaled that it could be, then we will defend our rights. There's rules that apply to these waivers. This idea that Congress can just revoke them because they're rules when they're not rules, and the parliamentarian has determined that they're not rules, would be unlawful. And we're going to make sure we monitor closely what's done and defend ourselves and protect our legal rights.
And as we wrap up here, I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you about this. Perhaps the biggest legal discussion this week wasn't about yesterday's oral arguments, but was about the president's plan to accept a Boeing 747 from the Qatar government. Is this legal? Can he do this?
It seems like it could very well violate the Emoluments Clause of the U.S. Constitution. And so I think a lot of people are just shocked by it from an everyday layperson's standards of decency and appropriateness and right and wrong approach, and then certainly legal scholars and legal experts and practitioners of the law are looking at the legality of it or lack thereof, the constitutionality of it or lack thereof. So unfortunately, shocking, yes. Surprising, no. Sort of the MO of the Trump administration to be engaged in conduct like this that is very much in the the area of unlawfulness. This has been a president who has been a repeat offender when it comes to breaking the law. 22 times in a short 16 weeks and counting. We don't expect it to stop or slow down, nor will we. We will meet him in court every time. We got gas in the tank. We're full of energy. We're ready to meet him in court and fight back and make sure we defend the Constitution and the rule of law and stop his unlawful conduct each and every time it occurs.
You have faith in the courts that they are willing to be a check on this president when this Republican majority Congress doesn't seem to want to be?
I do, and they have been so far. And I'm not naive about what the future might hold and what could be down the road. Some of the comments, from the Solicitor General for the United States at the birthright citizenship hearing, when asked directly if he would follow a order from an appellate court or from the Supreme Court, the answer should be absolutely. We follow court orders, period, full stop. But he didn't say that. He was conditional and would not be committal to following court orders. So that was worrisome. I think it was worrisome to the justices that heard it and the justice that asked it. But so far in our cases, when courts issue orders, they're broadly followed. Sometimes we need to bring a motion to enforce an order when some aspect of the order is not followed. And then once we win that motion, the order is followed. We'll see what happens down the road before we're at a constitutional crisis, as some have described that someone needs to be held in contempt of court, either civilly or criminally, and put in jail for their contempt of court, and we haven't gotten to that point yet. Yes, the courts are stress tested for sure, but they are holding and they are doing their job, and I trust that courts of law will continue to be places where justice is delivered.
All right, Attorney General Bonta, I really appreciate your time.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching our YouTube channel. Let Spectrum News be your resource for balanced, in-depth political coverage. And click the subscribe button here. You can also download our app and watch us on TV to learn more about the candidates, where they stand on the issues, and more. We'll see you then.